going to talk about some of the 4-month sleep regression issues because we had a few questions about some changes in sleep, and I think that's a little bit associated with the 4-month sleep regression. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Some things happen with sleep. I wrote that article about the 9-month sleep regression, and some of the background stuff is about the same, so you can go look for that article if you haven't read that. And it is on the Dream Baby Cafe website. But some things happen with sleep, just when you think you got things all figured out, a lot of times things will, jump in there and mess you up. That happens with a lot of things with babies. But with the first thing happens at 4 months. They call it a sleep regression, but I don't think it's a sleep regression. It's actually a progression. So what happens is babies move from their erratic sleep schedule to becoming more in a normal sleep pattern. And so they shouldn't call it a regression. They should actually call it a sleep progression into normal, sleep behavior, because all of a sudden they are governed by the circadian rhythms and the normal sleep hormones that people have. And so then they start developing some sleep habits that may not be very good. And so what you might see with that is that you think that they're in a routine and then they start waking up a lot. Babies that might be sleeping several hours during the night might be all of a sudden start waking up every couple of hours. And you're like, oh my gosh, what has happened here? Well, they really didn't have a sleep routine before. And now it's the time that you could start to develop one. But that really doesn't really start to happen until maybe 3 months, but usually around 4 months. And that's why they call it a 4-month regression. And it's really regressing. They're regressing in some of their good sleep. Maybe, because they were sleeping so much, they might not be sleeping as much anymore. And because they can develop bad habits. So I think it's a really, dumb name. But sleep, problems occur at 4 months. And so really we need to start looking at, well, what can you do about that? And so really the most important thing is that, start developing some good habits, because this is the time they can develop bad sleep habits. And I say they're really like my 3-step program is the first thing that you want to do is look at their sleep environment. And so if you haven't done this already, you really want to make their room a sleep haven, it's not the place to play and a place to sleep, unless you really have those kind of sectioned off, like this is your play area and this is your sleep area. You really want the room to be boring. So you want to have room darkening shades. You want to have a nice cool environment. You want to have a white noise machine. The lullabies and things like that, don't do it. You really want the white noise machine. You want their crib to be completely compliant with all sleep safe measures, sleep safety measures. You don't want crib toys like the mobiles and things that hang down, because if they do happen to, wake up during the night, you don't want them to see something and go, oh, wow, let's like have playtime. It's all really nice and boring. So you want to get a nice, good sleep environment. The second thing that you want to do is you want to have a nice routine. Even if they're young, even if they're little tiny babies, you want to have a really good routine, because if they're not governed by the sleep hormones and the sleep cycles, they can start to have a good routine if you have a good routine in your day. And you see that real clearly with people who are very regimented. Their babies sleep really well, even if they don't have, even if those babies don't have, melatonin and cortisol and all of that stuff working for them yet. And so when they do get to that age, they're going to be much easier to put into a sleep routine because they've already got good sleep habits going on. So you want to get up at the same time every day. And really feeding is more important than timing. So feeding them at regular intervals is important. Now that's hard to do with breastfed babies, I know. But you do know that they tend to eat, every 2 to 3 hours. And even formula, fed babies, getting them on a good schedule is important. And so one of the things that happens with breastfed babies, if you let them snack a lot, if you just let them, put them to the breast all the time, they don't get that full tummy, and then they don't sleep for long periods of time. And so when I look at people who are having problems with their baby sleeping, a lot of times I want to see what their feeding schedule looks like, because what we'll find out is that if they're snacking a lot, and you've heard me say this, they never get long stretches of time because their tummy doesn't get full enough to be able to hold them over. So being able to eat on a fairly regular schedule within some little guidelines. I'm not a regimented person. There are people who are very, very regimented, and I am not, but putting some guidelines into place in your schedule. So within some, little boundaries, about what time they're going to eat during the day, helps your child to get into good sleep habits. And then having a really, really good, nice bedtime routine is crucial, because babies live by knowing what to expect. And so if you have a really good bedtime routine, even if your baby's still waking up every 2 hours during the night, if you say 8 o'clock is bedtime, and that's when you turn your lights out and you turn your white noise machine on, you put the baby in the bed, when the baby's ready for bedtime and they're ready to sleep through the night, they already have established a routine, and it's not going to be, where you're saying, oh, all of a sudden we've got a bedtime routine and they're kicking and screaming through that. They've already known that schedule already. So those are the really important things to do to start off. If you're ready to start putting some kind of program into place, then you want to start looking at a log. You want to look at what kind of sleep schedule they have already. So if you start saying they ate at this time, they slept at this time, they ate this much at this time, you can get a good idea of what's going on. So keeping a log helps you to understand what your baby's natural rhythm is. So it's like, okay, my baby's been doing well, and okay, now they're waking up 2 hours earlier in the morning, or they're waking up a couple of times during the night. Are they waking up because they're hungry? Do I need to feed them? Do I not need to feed them? Keeping that log really helps you to know that. If they're sleeping those short little naps, like 30-minute cat naps, it may be that they're in that light sleep. And in light sleep, they're not really, when they're waking up, they may not be ready to wake up, but they come up to that sleep at the top of their sleep cycle. And that at nighttime, you would just turn over and go back to sleep. As an adult. And babies that know how to put themselves to sleep at night might roll over, and go back to sleep, or look for their pacifier and go back to sleep. Babies in the daytime don't oftentimes have those like cycles where they'll go back into another cycle. They have those short cycles and then they wake up. If that's the case, you can ease them back into sleep. So if you're noticing that they're only sleeping 30 minutes at a time and they're sleeping pretty regularly, if you can get to them before they fully wake up. If you know that your baby's sleeping from 10 to 10:30 and then they're going to wake up, you can go in there and you can, watch as they're stirring, and you can give them their pacifier and pat them and try to get them back to sleep. And that may work. And then you can get them back into another sleep cycle, and they might sleep about another 30 minutes. And then you can extend those sleep periods so they'll sleep a little bit longer during the day. At about 4 months to 6 months or so, maybe even longer, babies should be sleeping about 3 naps. And you would hope that they would be like an hour and a half each. And then that third nap might be kind of short. But some babies will still just do those little cat naps all throughout the day. But 3 naps, an hour and a half or so is, kind of what you would expect. But you can kind of ease them if they're taking those short naps back into another sleep cycle. And you might have to pick them up and rock them a little bit and then lay them back down. But that's okay. To try to get them a little bit more sleep, that's okay. Because you want that daytime sleep to be really important if you're working on nighttime sleep. Sometimes we want things to happen really badly, but sometimes babies just aren't developmentally ready to do something. And there's a wide range. And, Facebook is a bad thing sometimes when you see that your friend's baby is sleeping through the night at 6 weeks. First of all, you have to ask what sleeping through the night means, because sleeping through the night technically is like 6 hours. Well, I'd like to get a little bit more than 6 hours sleep, but oftentimes I don't. But babies, people oftentimes will think a baby should sleep for 12 hours. And developmentally, a lot of babies can't sleep through the night for 12 hours without some feedings. And a lot of times we will say sleeping through the night, is 12 hours, but that still might mean that they get 2 feedings at night. So that just means that they're sleeping well, but they're waking up for a feeding and going right back to sleep. And so like at 4 months, a lot of babies still need 1 or even 2 feedings at night. Well, how do you know that? So if we look at their nap schedule, if a baby's taking very short periods of sleep during the day, and then they're going to need, and their naps don't equal 3 or 4 hours, then they're going to need longer sleep during the night. If they're sleeping longer during the night, longer hours during the night, they're going to need feedings during the night probably. So if we look at that, if a baby's sleeping like 30-minute cat naps, and that's still normal from up to about 6 months, it's normal for some babies to only cat nap, like 30-minute little segments. The problem with that is they're not getting that long 3 to 4 hours of sleep during the day. If they're not getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep during the day, they have to make that up at night, which means they need about 11 or 12 hours of sleep at night. 11 or 12 hours of sleep at night means they probably are going to need a feeding or 2. So if they're, only getting, 2 hours of sleep, they're probably going to need some feedings at night. If they're sleeping longer stretches in the day and they're getting 3 hours of sleep, then they may still need 1 feeding during the night. If they're sleeping those 4 hours of sleep during the day, then they probably aren't going to sleep but maybe 10 or 11 hours at night, and they can get away without a feeding. I hope that's making sense. That about 4 months is when you can start trying to get them into a routine. And then you can start working on the third thing, which is taking away sleep associations, which is feeding them to sleep, rocking them to sleep, things like that. All right. Well, that's it for tonight. That's like enough to really handle for right now. If you have any questions, you can put them in there and I'll answer them later on.